The wind rolled in across the plains like a whisper of trouble, carrying dust that caught the last threads of sunlight. Hollow Creek was quiet that evening, too quiet for Eli Mercer's liking. He'd ridden into town for nothing more than supplies, but the air had that taut, watchful feel like the land itself was holding its breath. They called him the giant cowboy, though he'd never asked for the name, standing 6'6" with shoulders like timber beams and hands that could snap a fence post. He was the sort of man people noticed whether he wanted them to or not, but Eli preferred shadows. Less talk, fewer questions. He was tying his horse outside Milner's store when he saw her, Maggie Hensley, a woman in mourning black, the sort of black that wasn't for style but for the dead. She stood on the porch of the general store, clutching a bundle in her arms. The fabric shifted, and a pale, tiny face peeked out the baby. Eli had seen her once before, months back, when her husband was still alive. She'd had a light in her eyes then. Now, that light was gone, replaced with something colder, sharper. What caught him wasn't her beauty, though there was that, but the way she glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting something to come crawling out of the shadows after her. She stepped down from the porch, and in that moment, fate decided to get involved. A wagon rattled past too close, spooking her. She stumbled, clutching the baby tighter but not tight enough. Eli's long stride closed the gap in 2 steps, his arms sweeping out. One moment, the baby was tumbling. The next, the small weight was in his arms, pressed against his chest. The child didn't cry, didn't even stir. He simply rested there, tiny head rising and falling with Eli's slow breathing, as if he'd known this chest all his life. Maggie froze, her eyes wide, not in gratitude, but in something nearer to shock. "Give him back," she said quickly, voice low and edged. Eli handed the baby over without a word, though he couldn't help noticing the faint tremble in her hands. Not fear of him, no, something else. "You're far from your ranch, Mrs. Hensley," he said, voice deep enough to turn heads halfway down the street. Her eyes flicked past him, scanning the road, the doorways, the darkened alleys. "Not far enough," she murmured. Then, with a brief nod, she turned and began walking away. Eli watched her go, the child's soft head nestled under her chin. He should have left it there, a passing moment, nothing more. But as he moved to collect his supplies, he caught sight of a man in the shadows between the saloon and the blacksmith's, a tall figure, hat brim pulled low, watching Maggie like a hawk over a field mouse. Eli's jaw tightened. He knew trouble when he saw it. Inside the store, Milner leaned over the counter. "Best keep to your own business, Mercer," he muttered quietly. "That widow's got the sort of past that draws wolves." Eli didn't answer. He was thinking about the way that man's hand had rested near his hip, fingers curling just shy of a gun. He was thinking about Maggie's quickened steps and that strange, absolute calm of her baby against his chest. As Eli rode out of town with the sun bleeding into the hills, he caught sight of her again on the far road, walking faster now, almost running, and trailing far behind, keeping just enough distance, was the shadow from the alley. He could have turned away, could have let it be, but there was something about the way she clutched that child, something that stirred an old, buried oath he'd once sworn and broken. Eli Mercer turned his horse toward the narrow trail that would cross her path ahead. Hollow Creek's night was about to get dangerous. The moon was already climbing when Eli reached the ridge, his horse's hooves muffled against the dry earth. From here, the trail wound down toward the flats where Maggie was making her way home. She walked fast, clutching the baby like a lifeline, her black skirts tugged by the wind. Eli reined in, waiting. Sure enough, the man from the alley appeared on the lower bend. He wasn't just following her, he was closing in. A long coat swayed around his legs, the gleam of metal catching moonlight at his side. Eli's jaw worked slow, like a man chewing over a decision he already knew he'd make. When Maggie came around the bend and saw him waiting, she stopped dead. Her eyes were the same storm gray he remembered, but now they flashed something between alarm and relief. "You again," she said, not quite friendly, but not sending him away either. "Roads not safe tonight," Eli replied, gaze flicking past her to the shadow, moving nearer. "You've got company." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "He's been following me since the store. You know him?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. The man emerged into clearer light, and Eli caught the face, gaunt, sharp-featured, the kind of man who'd knife you for your boots and grin while doing it. He stopped a few yards away, hands loose at his sides. "Evening," the stranger drawled. His voice was smooth, but there was a rasp in it like stone dragging over stone. "Mrs. Hensley, didn't expect to see you out here alone." "She's not alone," Eli said, voice carrying like low thunder. The stranger's eyes shifted, taking in Eli's size. A flicker of calculation moved across his face. "And who might you be? Not your concern." A slow grin spread over the man's lips. "See, thing is, Maggie and I have unfinished business. You step aside, giant, and I might let you walk away." Eli didn't move. "You're going to turn around, keep walking, and forget you ever saw her." The silence between them stretched, thick enough to choke on. The baby made a faint sound, more breath than cry, and the man's gaze dropped to the small bundle. Something dark flickered in his eyes. "That's not yours, Maggie," he said, almost taunting. "You and I both know who enough." Maggie's voice cracked like a whip, startling even Eli. "Say one more word, and you won't live to finish it." The man laughed low and ugly. "You think you can?" Eli moved. It wasn't a lunge or a wild swing, just a step forward, deliberate, shoulders squaring. And in that single step, the stranger saw what every man who'd crossed Eli Mercer eventually understood. This was not a man you tested twice. The grin slipped. His eyes darted between them, weighing his odds, and then he gave a mock tip of his hat. "This ain't over, Maggie." He turned, boots crunching on the dirt, and vanished into the darkness the way he'd come. Maggie stood frozen, her breathing sharp. For a long moment, only the sound of the wind moved between them. Then, quietly, she said, "You shouldn't have done that." Eli tilted his head. "And why's that?" "Because now," she whispered, "he knows you'll fight for me." It should have sounded ungrateful, but there was something else in her tone, something almost frightened for him. She adjusted the baby in her arms, as though that small life was all that kept her anchored to the ground. Uar studied her for a beat longer, then offered his hand. "Let me ride you home." She hesitated, searching his face. Maybe she saw something there she could trust, because she finally nodded. He swung down, lifted her into the saddle with the baby still snug against her chest, then mounted up behind Dot as they rode toward the dark outline of her ranch. Maggie kept her gaze fixed ahead, but her voice was barely a breath when she said, "You don't know what you've stepped into, Eli Mercer." He didn't answer, but he was starting to think he wanted to find out. The ride to Maggie's ranch was silent, but not empty. Eli could feel her back against his chest, the baby's soft breathing between them, the faint scent of lavender clinging to her hair. The night was cold, but something about her presence made it feel less so. When the ranch finally came into view, Eli noticed two things at once. First, it was far from town, surrounded by open land, no close neighbors in sight. Second, every window was dark, and the only light came from a single lamp flickering on the porch. She slid down from the saddle, thanking him without meeting his eyes. "You should go back," she said quickly, like she was trying to close a door before he could step inside. "Not yet." His gaze swept the yard, the shadows, the tree line beyond. "That man back in town, he'll come again." "I know." Her tone was too calm, too certain. She shifted the baby in her arms. "That's why you should leave before you're part of this." He stepped closer. Part of what her lips pressed into a thin line. She turned toward the porch. Eli followed Dot when she reached the door. He saw something that made his gut tighten. 3 heavy locks, one above the other. She unlocked them fast, almost nervously, then ushered him in before he could comment. Dot inside. The place felt wrong. It wasn't messy, but it looked lived in by someone who never truly rested. Curtains thick enough to block moonlight. A rifle leaning by the kitchen doorway. A baby cradle pushed close to the hearth as if warmth and safety could be piled together in one spot. She lit another lamp, its glow catching her face. That's when he saw it, a faint bruise along her jawline, half hidden by her hair. Voice dropped. "Who did that?" Her hand came up almost offensively. "It's nothing. It's not nothing." Her eyes met his then, steady, but haunted. "You don't want the truth, Eli Mercer. Not unless you're ready to carry it." "I'm here, aren't I?" That earned him the smallest, almost bitter smile. For now, she laid the baby in the cradle, smoothing the blanket over the tiny form. Her hands lingered, fingers trembling for just a moment before she stepped back. He looked around again. Why so many locks? Her eyes shifted toward the door. "Because sometimes," she said softly, "walls and distance aren't enough. Not when the past knows your name." Eli didn't press, not yet. He had learned that pushing a frightened the person only made them close up tighter. But before he could speak again, there was a sound, faint but sharp from outside. A slow, deliberate creak, like a boot on wood. They both froze. Her eyes went to the door, wide now. Eli's hand went to the revolver at his hip. The baby stirred, making a soft noise. Dot another creak closer, then 3 slow knocks. Not a neighbor's polite tap, not a stranger's request, but a measured, taunting rhythm. Knock, 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 knock. Eli moved to the window, keeping to the side. In the lamplight spilling across the porch, he saw nothing, but he felt it. Someone was out there, someone waiting for them to make the first move. Maggie whispered, "Don't open it." Eli's eyes stayed fixed on the door. "Who is it?" Her answer came like a drop of ice down his spine. "The man who swore I'd never see another sunrise unless I came back to him." The knock stopped. Silence. And then, from somewhere in the dark, a voice floated through the wood, low, cold. "You've got company, Maggie, but don't worry, I'll take care of him too." The silence after that voice was worse than the knocking. Eli stayed still by the window, one hand on the revolver, the other steady against the wall as if feeling for movement. Outside, the wind had died completely. No rustle of grass, no creak of the barn, just the weight of someone's presence. Maggie's breathing was tight, almost silent. She clutched the cradle with both hands, as though sheer willpower could keep danger out. "He's gone," Eli whispered finally. Her eyes didn't move from the door. "He never just goes." Eli looked at her for a long second, then stepped away from the window. You've got too many shadows in this house for one woman and a baby. I've survived worse. Maybe, he said, voice dropping, but not with me here. Her gaze flickered, a mixture of mistrust and something softer, buried deep. You can't stay. Watch me. She turned away, perhaps to hide the way. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but didn't. Instead, she busied herself, banking the fire, avoiding his eyes. But Eli could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she listened to every creak. He found an old rocking chair by the hearth and sat down, his frame nearly swallowing it. You get some rest. I'll keep watch. Maggie hesitated. You don't even know what he's capable of. Eli's jaw tightened. I've met men who talk like he does. Some are all noise. Others, he paused, looking straight at her. Others I bury. Something in the bluntness of that sentence made her blink. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, as though warmth alone could shield her from his words. The baby stirred again, fussing softly. Without thinking, Eli reached. That Maggie hesitated then. Slowly, handed the tiny bundle over. The weight surprised him. Small, fragile, yet somehow steady. The baby's head rested against his chest, and almost instantly, the little thing went still. Eli's heartbeat must have been a better lullaby than silence. Maggie watched, and for the first time since he'd met her, her guard slipped, just a fraction. Enough for him to see the truth in her eyes, exhaustion, grief, and an aching loneliness she'd been trying to outstare for far too long. You're good with her, she murmured. Eli kept his gaze on the baby. I had a little sister once. Looked after her more than my PA ever did. What happened? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She read the answer in the hard set of his mouth. Minutes passed like that, her watching him rocking the baby until a sudden thud came from the back of the house. Both froze. Eli rose silently, shifting the baby into one arm and drawing his revolver with the other. Maggie's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Another thud. This one against the rear wall, near the kitchen. Stay here, he whispered. She caught his sleeve, her grip urgent. No, if he's here, he won't just stop at the back door. Eli eased her hand away and moved into the shadows, every step slow, deliberate. The floorboards didn't dare creak under him. In the dark, the back door came into view and it was ajar, just an inch, just enough for someone to slip through. He was almost there when something brushed against his shoulder. Not a hand, not a person, a length of rope, dangling from the rafters above, and in that split second he realized someone had been inside before they even got home. Eli's hand hovered over the rope. It swayed slightly in the still air, as though whoever had tied it there had only just let go. His eyes narrowed. This wasn't just some farmer's cord. It was thick, frayed at the ends, and knotted into a noose hanging in Maggie's home. He heard her footsteps behind him, faint but too close for comfort. Maggie, he said quietly, without turning. Did you leave this here? Her breath hitched. No, he turned. In the dim light her face was pale, but it wasn't just fear, it was recognition. You've seen this before, he pressed. She shook her head, but her eyes told a different story. It's warning. From him, Eli asked. She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the baby in his arm, who slept on without a care. Then she looked at the rope again and whispered, He's telling me I've run far enough. Eli's jaw clenched. And you believe him? Her eyes flicked to his. He's never wrong. That was the thing about Maggie. She carried her fear like an old wound, not screaming, not panicked, just resigned, like she'd been living with it so long it had settled into her bones. Eli reached up, yanked the rope free from the beam, and threw it into the fireplace. Flames bit at it instantly, curling the fibers into black smoke. Maggie stepped back. You shouldn't have done that. I don't take orders from shadows. But even as he said it, Eli's gut twisted. Whoever had been here was skilled enough to get inside, leave their mark, and vanish without a sound. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the back door again. Just beyond it, fresh tracks cut into the dirt, boot prints, heavy and heading straight toward the trees he wanted to follow, to end this before it got worse. But when he looked back at Maggie clutching herself as though holding her body together, he knew he couldn't leave her and the baby alone. Tell me who he is, Eli said, stepping closer. Her lips parted, then pressed shut again. Maggie, he said, voice low but unyielding. I've been shot at, hunted, and chased out of towns. I've buried friends and enemies alike, but I have never ever walked away from someone who needed me. Don't make me stand here and guess. Her eyes finally met his, and for the first time he saw a crack in her resolve. His name's Thomas Rayburn. He's not a man. He's a sickness. The name hung in the air like a curse. And the baby, Eli asked, voice quieter now. Her silence was answer enough. Something in his chest tightened. The pieces were falling together, just not fast enough to keep up with the danger pressing in. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. All right, we'll do it your way for now. But when he comes back, and he will, you let me deal with him. A voice was barely above a whisper. You can't kill what doesn't fear dying. Eli's eyes hardened. Then I'll find something he does fear. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the shutters like bony fingers. Somewhere in the dark, a low whistle carried across the field, too deliberate to be the wind. Maggie flinched. Eli's grip tightened on the baby. Because that whistle, it was a signal, and it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for whoever was still inside the house. The whistle came again. Low and deliberate, the kind that makes your skin prickle before your mind catches up. Eli turned slowly, scanning the corners of the dim room, every muscle tight. Maggie was frozen, her hands clenched against her chest, eyes darting between him and the back door. Eli shifted the baby to his left arm, freeing his right. He drew his revolver, the metal whispering as it cleared the holster. "Stay behind me," he murmured. She didn't argue, she just moved closer. So close he could feel the tremble in her breath against his back. The sound came again, not the whistle this time, but the faint creak of floorboards. Not from upstairs. From the pantry. Eli's boots made no sound as he crossed the room. He pressed his back to the wall, hand on the door handle, eyes cutting to Maggie for the briefest second. Her face was ashen, her lips parted like she was about to say something. Don't, but it was too late. He yanked the pantry door open. A man stood inside. Tall, thin as a fence post, but with eyes that burned like a man who'd stared at fire and learnt to enjoy the heat. His coat hung in tatters, dust and blood staining the fabric, but it was the smile that froze the air between them, slow, stretching without warmth, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. "Evening," the man said, voice smooth but soured at the edges. "I see you've made yourself right at home." Eli's gun was already leveled. "Step out." The man didn't move. Funny thing, giant cowboy standing in another man's kitchen. Funny and foolish. Maggie's voice cut the tension like a brittle thread. "Thomas." Eli didn't look at her, but he felt the shift in the room, the way that name brought the air down to a colder place. "Now that's sweet," Thomas drawled, stepping into the light. "She still remembers me." Eli's grip tightened on the revolver. "You've got 5 seconds to explain why you're here before I put you through the wall." Thomas's eyes flicked to the baby. That smile deepened, almost tender, but it wasn't tenderness at all. It was ownership. "Well now," he said softly, "ain't that a picture?" Eli took a step forward, forcing Thomas back into the pantry doorway. "You don't look at her, you don't speak to her, you turn around and walk out." Thomas tilted his head. "Or what? You'll kill me." "Men have tried." Eli didn't blink. "I'm not most men." Maggie's hand gripped Eli's arm suddenly. "Don't," she whispered. "Not here." Thomas chuckled, and the sound was worse than any shout. "She's right, cowboy. This house has seen enough blood. But you." He took one slow step forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You don't even know what you've stepped into." Eli could feel Maggie's tremor through her grip. The baby stirred slightly against his chest, a small whimper breaking the tension for half a second, and then Thomas leaned forward, just enough for Eli to see the madness in his eyes. "You can guard her all you want, but every man has to sleep sometime." Eli's revolver was pressed to Thomas's sternum before the last word left his mouth. "I've got news for you. I sleep light." They stood locked there, neither moving, the fire snapping behind them. Then Thomas took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "This isn't over," he said simply. Eli's voice was ice. "It's barely started." Thomas slipped past the threshold, pausing at the doorway. He looked once more at Maggie, and this time she dropped her gaze, unable to meet his eyes. He smiled at that. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut. Behind him for a long moment, the only sound was the wind scraping at the shutters. Eli holstered his revolver slowly. "You need to tell me everything," he said. Maggie's answer was a whisper so faint he almost didn't catch it. "If I do, you'll never stay." Eli looked at her, then really looked and realized she wasn't afraid of losing her life. She was afraid of losing him, and for the first time since riding into this cursed town, Eli understood that keeping her safe might cost more than his blood. The wind outside had sharpened into a constant moan, rattling the loose panes in their frames. Eli set another log on the fire, the crackle loud in the quiet room. Maggie sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug she hadn't touched. The baby slept in a basket near the hearth, the flickering light brushing over her tiny face. Eli finally broke the silence. "Who is he, Maggie? And don't tell me just a name." She stared at the fire for a moment before speaking, her voice barely above the wind. "Thomas is my husband." The words hung heavy in the air. Eli didn't move. "Husband? You told me that he was dead," she interrupted, her eyes flashing with pain. "Because I thought he was. I prayed he was." Her fingers tightened on the mug. 3 years ago, Thomas rode out with a group of men after a fight in town, drunk, angry. They robbed a stagecoach, killed the driver. The sheriff's posse caught most of them. Thomas didn't come back. Word was he'd been shot dead near the canyon. Eli's jaw was tight, but his voice stayed calm. "And now," she said, her voice trembling, "I know he let the world think he was dead. He's been hiding, watching, and tonight, he decided to show himself." Eli leaned against the table, his shadow falling across her. Why now?" She looked at him then, and for the first time there was no mask between them because of the baby. Eli's brow furrowed. "He thinks he knows she's not his," Maggie said sharply, her eyes wet. "But men like Thomas don't." They care about truth. They care about control. He'll take her from me, Eli. Just to break me. Something in Eli's chest tightened. Who's the father? Her gaze didn't waver. He was a ranch hand. Kind, gentle, everything Thomas wasn't. He died before he knew I was with child. She looked away. When Thomas left, I thought maybe God had given me a second chance. I could raise my baby in peace. Eli's voice was low, and then I walked in. A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. And then you walked in, a stranger who should have kept writing, but instead, you stayed. And the moment I saw you hold her, I knew I didn't want you to leave. The silence between them was thick with something unspoken. Eli reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Her fingers were cold, but she didn't pull away. You're not alone anymore, he said. Quietly, if Thomas wants to take her, he'll have to come through me. Maggie's eyes searched his face, as though looking for some crack in his certainty. You don't know what he's capable of. Eli's voice deepened. I've known men like him all my life, and I've put more than one in the ground. The way he said it wasn't boast, it was promise. Maggie's hand trembled under his, but her lips curved into something almost like hope. Why? Why would you risk yourself for us? Eli hesitated. His life had been built on moving, never staying. Long enough to answer questions like that. But now, because when I walked into this house, I didn't see trouble. I saw you, and I saw her. And for the first time in a long while, I wanted something worth protecting. Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat neither moved. Then, she reached up, her fingertips brushing the edge of his jaw, a touch as tentative as it was sure. The fire popped loudly. The baby stirred, and they both pulled back just enough to remember that danger wasn't gone. Eli straightened. He'll come again. Next time he won't be talking. Maggie nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. Then we'll be ready. He took a slow breath, his mind already calculating. First light. I'm boarding the windows, securing the doors. After that, we set a trap, she whispered. Eli single quotes. Gaze was steel. Men like Thomas don't stop until you stop them. I don't plan on waiting for him to choose the time. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, a silent pact sealed between them. Then Maggie reached for the baby, holding her close. Whatever happens, she said, don't let him hurt her. Eli stepped forward, his massive frame casting her and the baby in shadow. Maggie, he said softly, he won't lay a hand on either of you. Not while I'm breathing. And in that dim room, with the wind clawing at the walls, the unspoken truth settled in Eli's chest. This fight wasn't about survival anymore. It was about belonging. Dawn bled across the plains in slow strokes of gold and crimson. Eli had been up for hours, the air sharp in his lungs as he hammered thick planks over the windows. Inside, Maggie moved quietly, keeping the baby calm, her eyes darting toward the door every few minutes. By midday, the cabin had been transformed, not just secured but prepared. The front door had been reinforced with an iron bar from Eli. Saddle gear, the floor swept clear of anything that could trip a man moving fast. Near the hearth, Eli had set a single chair in the center of the room. It wasn't for comfort, it was bait. He stood near the window, shotgun in hand, watching the horizon. He'll come when he thinks we're tired, Eli said without looking back. Maggie's voice was tight. And if he brings others, then I'll make sure they ride back carrying him, Eli said flatly. The sun dipped lower. The baby, oblivious to the storm brewing, slept in Maggie's arms. The world seemed too still, the air too heavy. Eli's gut told him it wouldn't be long. It wasn't. The crunch of hooves on frozen dirt came first, slow, deliberate. Then, the creak of leather. Eli's shoulders tensed. He moved to the door, pulling it open just enough to see. Thomas Kane sat tall in the saddle, his black coat rippling in the wind, a smirk carved into his face. Two other men flanked him, rifles slung low. Maggie's grip on the baby tightened. Thomas dismounted, like a man strolling into his own home. Evening, Maggie, he drawled. I see you've been keeping the bed warm without me. His eyes slid to Eli. And you, the giant. Your new. Eli stepped forward, filling the doorway. Turn around and ride out. This ain't your home anymore. Thomas's grin sharpened. Oh, it's mine. Everything in it. Especially what's in her arms. Eli's voice was steel. She's not yours. Thomas took one slow step closer. She's mine because Maggie's mine, and I take back what's mine. Eli didn't move. You try, and you'll die here. Thomas laughed, a short, ugly sound. You think you can scare me, cowboy? Eli's reply was low. I'm not trying to scare you. The next second shattered the standoff. One of Thomas's men raised his rifle, and Eli moved faster than seemed possible for a man his size. The shotgun roared, the echo rattling the cabin walls. The man crumpled before he even hit the dirt. The second drew his weapon. But Eli's revolver was already in his hand. 2 shots, and the man folded. Now it was just Thomas. His smirk was gone, replaced by something harder. He drew his pistol, aiming for Eli's chest. But Eli didn't flinch. He stepped forward, letting the barrel press against him. You won't pull that trigger, Eli said, his voice low and certain. Thomas's finger twitched. Why not? Because deep down, you know I'm the thing between you and the hell you've been running from. For a heartbeat, Thomas's eyes flickered, not fear, but something close. Then he snarled and shoved Eli back, swinging his pistol toward Maggie. That was the last mistake Thomas Kane ever made. Eli moved faster than thought, his massive hand closing around Thomas's wrist, wrenching the gun free. In the same motion, he slammed Thomas against the doorframe. "The wood cracked, you touch her again," Eli growled, "and the last thing you'll see is me." Thomas spat, defiant to the end. "She'll never be yours." Eli didn't reply. He hauled Thomas outside, threw him into the saddle and slapped the horse hard. The animal bolted into the distance. Thomas didn't look back. The quiet that, while followed, felt heavier than the gunfire. Maggie stepped into the doorway, the baby in her arms, her eyes wide and wet. Eli holstered his gun. "It's over." Maggie walked toward him, stopping just inches away. "No, Eli," she whispered. "It's just beginning." She reached up, her hand warm against his cheek. And this time, there was no hesitation. Eli bent, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both a promise and a release, the kind of kiss that says you're safe now. When they finally pulled apart, the baby stirred, letting out a small sigh. Eli smiled faintly. "Guess she approves." Maggie laughed softly, the first real laugh he'd heard from her. "She should. You just gave her a father." Eli glanced toward the horizon, then back at the small home behind them. For the first time in years, the road didn't call to him. "I reckon I'll be staying a while," he said. And as the sun set over the quiet plains, the giant cowboy, the widow, and her baby stepped back inside the door, closing on a past they'd finally outrun.